The future of warfare has already changed. This war is a war of drones.
Ukraine is at the forefront of drone technology innovation.
Now we are not only fighting on the battlefield, we are fighting on the technologies war.
The testing ground is not just in the lab, but in combat.
There's only two countries now currently in the world that have that knowledge. It's us and the Russians.
On a training ground near Kyiv, soldiers are learning to operate the latest first-person view FPV drones.
These are very fast, very maneuverable, very technique drones and very difficult to operate.
Is there any point in spending millions of dollars on a new Challenger tank if a $500 drone can take it out?
That's the point. The drone technology changes everything. We couldn't even imagine that we can fight without billions of dollars invested in our Ukrainian army, but we are staying against the biggest army in the world, and this technology helps us to stay and to fight.
Museum pieces, memories of battles past, a lesson in Ukraine's bloody history. Compared to the massive tanks that lumbered across the steppe in World War II, the drone is tiny. And it's cheap compared to the MiG fighters of the 1980s.
These old missiles and tanks and aircraft were once cutting-edge military technology. They tell the story of warfare in Ukraine in the 20th century. Once again, Ukrainians are the victims of battlefield machines, but now they're also the innovators.
In dozens of labs, soldiers are learning to repair and improve the 4.5 million drones that will be produced in Ukraine this year. At Drone Space Labs, they pioneered drones tethered to the operator with a fiber optic cable to avoid radio signals which the Russians can jam.
They told us how you can have a drone with the line. It's like stupid. And now we on the battlefield we understand that we see that there is a lot of optic drones used in the on the field as itself.
European companies are piggybacking on Ukrainian innovation and battlefield testing.
Right now we are able to test the technologies in the real world. Not only on the paper. That's why we try to share and explain to the manufacturers in the Europe how they need to build their products so this product can be used for the military technologies.
Manufacturers produce slick video promos, but are careful not to give away secrets that could benefit the Russians. Some drones now have AI guidance, allowing them to lock onto targets in the final phase of flight, even if the link between the pilot and the drone is jammed. Newer drones have ever longer range.
It's a very, very rapidly changing war game, because the moment we come up with some innovative solution for the soldiers, for the front lines, very shortly afterwards, Russians come up with a countermeasure. Then we have to think quick. So the cycle of innovation is really fast, and we just want our European partners to benefit from it. And you know, as ancient Romans have said, you want peace, prepare for the war.
On the front line, it doesn't always look so high-tech. Near Kherson, soldiers practice shooting down Russian drones with old machine guns. Their own reconnaissance drones track the Russian drone trajectory. But here, at least, the countermeasures are pretty haphazard.
They're given the coordinates of where they are moving. We can see in real time where it's flying. We look at the route where we can approach and then we go for it. But sometimes it's too high to see.
Each Ukrainian brigade makes videos of their best drone strikes set to music. The Russian soldiers so many tiny figures on the screen. We won't show it, but sometimes the drone swoops in close, revealing the faces of the men being killed in their final moments. Piteous recognition in fixed eyes, as Wilfred Owen wrote, just without the bayonet jabbing and killing. The future of warfare is high-tech, but the reality remains the same. One young man using the machinery of the day to kill another.
Lindsay Hilson reporting there. Well, Fiona Hill was Senior Director for European and Russian Affairs on the US National Security Council during the first Trump presidency and is now a Senior Fellow in the Center on the United States and Europe at the Brookings Institution. She joins me live from Washington, D.C. Fiona, it's good to speak to you again. I mean, a couple of things. You heard what Lindsay there had to say, referring to the White House briefing today, where they simply got their facts wrong on the Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant. But also looking ahead to that phone conversation tomorrow, do you think Vladimir Putin will play Donald Trump like a fiddle?
Well, if perhaps not like a fiddle, he's certainly going to try to play him. It's basically the modus operandi of Vladimir Putin. And we've got to remember he's been practicing this, in terms of working with people his entire career. It's his number one skill, as he tells people. And of course, he's been in the presidency in Russia for 25 years. So he really doesn't need any preparation. He knows these issues inside out. He knows what he wants to get. And he's working with a team that he's had around him for years as well, who all work fairly seamlessly. So, this is really a formidable group of people that you're dealing with.
And how does that team stack up against people like Steve Witkoff, who is officially Donald Trump's Middle East envoy, but who was dispatched to the Kremlin last week and apparently kept waiting for hours and hours?
The power play that Putin always engages in is keeping people waiting. I mean, everyone from the Pope to, every head of government, even if it's just by a few minutes. I mean, it's very rare that he doesn't do this, and is usually a signal then of something that he wants to get done himself. And if we think about this from that whole perspective, it's Putin didn't ask for this intervention by the United States. He didn't ask for this ceasefire. He didn't ask for this peace process. He's intending to see what he can get out of it. And this is really the danger that Steve Witkoff is walking into and has already been walking into. He's obviously an extraordinarily accomplished business person. I'm not going to, make any criticism about that. But he's really dealing with something that isn't about business. This isn't about commercial real estate. This is about Vladimir Putin wanting to actually aggrandize and enlarge the Russian state. And it's deeply steeped in history that I don't think, with all due respect to Mr. Witkoff, that he fully appreciates.
I mean, the Russians seem to have been getting concessions beyond their wildest dreams. And, they're almost in some kind of fairy tale here as far as they're concerned. Do you think there's a danger in this, especially if the concessions stop?
It's an enormous danger because, at the moment, Russia isn't making any concession at all, as you're pointing out here, and as Lindsay was all pointing out. There's also a whole realm of issues, including the Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant, that have already been on the agenda for some time. The Ukrainians themselves had a 10-point peace plan in which energy and nuclear issues were also included. And the International Atomic Energy Agency has already been on the ground trying to intervene in Zaporizhzhia and these other power plants. There's many power plants, in fact, in Ukraine that are in jeopardy. And this has been a part of the problem that we're dealing with. This is not just two sides to this conflict, as Trump keeps saying. It's not just Russia and Ukraine. The United States has been party to this dynamic for a long time. There's also all of the European countries, the NATO countries, the European Union, which has very strong ties already with Ukraine. There's a whole host of other Ukraine neighbors. And of course, this is a global conflict. We have Iran, North Korea, and China involved as well.
The Americans have been trying to infantilize Europe's role in all this, but actually you could argue that it has made Europe great again. So just on that matter, do you think that European troops sent to Ukraine without an American security backstop is a good idea?
Well, look, I wouldn't say that it's made Europe great again, but it's certainly getting Europe in motion. And I think there's a real potential there for this to be something serious. Now, of course, if there's not a US backdrop, that already becomes serious in all kinds of other dimensions. It means that Europe has to come up with its own guarantees, a kind of Article 5-like version that Giorgia Meloni, the head of Italy, has already actually been talking about publicly. It just means that there's going to be a whole acceleration of this process of Europe coming into its own. It does, of course, make it extraordinarily difficult in the near term for Europe to be as effective as it could be. I actually have a lot of confidence in Europe. I think the UK and the UK government's been playing a very important role here. But the real problem is in the time scale. This has all happened extraordinarily quickly.
You're involved also in the UK defence review. Do you think that Britain can actually send 10,000 soldiers to Ukraine as peacekeepers or something in that role?
I'm not talking about any country doing this individually. And there's already been a great deal of discussion, even at the NATO level and sub-NATO level, about allied rapid reaction corps and all kinds of strategic rapid corps that would be put onto the field in other situations, with France and the UK being involved. The UK is part of the Joint Expeditionary Force, which involves the Nordic and Baltic countries, as well as Denmark and the Netherlands, that have already been practicing for various contingencies. We've talked about Turkey, which is a part of NATO, at some point thinking about some of these security issues. I think, look, there's a lot of potential here for the UK to act in coordination with other countries. The problem is the speed in which this is occurring, because Trump is driving this because he wants to have a quick resolution.
He wants to have a quick resolution. He's in a hurry. I wonder if we in Europe, should we be in more of a hurry? Because we talked about increasing defense spending, but maybe, waiting for 3% of GDP until the next parliament is too long and not enough.
Look, I don't think we need to do that. I think this is really a part of mobilizing action so that then, the other issues become basically resolved by necessity. And again, anything that the UK would be doing is always in coordination, in close coordination with other allies. And I know this makes it very difficult from the bilateral US-UK perspective, but there's been a lot of bilateral diplomacy going on. But really, the UK is already leaning into its partnerships, and it has multiple bilateral security agreements with other European states, with immediate neighbours. I've already mentioned the Joint Expeditionary Force, but also with Germany and with France directly. I would say there's actually a lot to work on here again. It's just that speed is the problem.
I'm going to ask you one final question that I would not have asked you, even 2 months ago, which is, do you think there's any danger of the American equipment that we've been buying for years not working because they don't want it to work for us?
Look, this is something that has to be dealt with head on. I think this is the question that European governments and other NATO allies have to make to the United States, have to pose it. And I think that question was only put on the table, as you suggest, by some of the really unprecedented actions that the United States has taken with allies and with partners and countries that it's previously supported. So it's the US that's put that question on the table, really not the European allies, but it has to be actually confronted.
I think we'll have to agree that we live in a rather brave, new and uncertain world. Fiona Hill, thank you very much indeed for coming on the programme.